Hey everybody, thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us on this B1UP webinar. So I'm Jerwin Begonia. I'll be doing most of the driving and the talking today. We've also got Gerald Lalji available too. He's our senior SAP consultant. And I just want to go out there and say that, you know, Gerald is probably one of the most experienced B1UP experts in Canada, if not North America. And so what does that mean to you as a customer? As a project line customer means you have access to him, okay? So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about extending and customizing SAP Business One with B1UP. So your first question is probably, what is B1UP? Think of B1UP as an extension of SAP Business One. You might hear me refer to it as SBO throughout the rest of the demo, but it's basically putting SAP Business One on steroids, right? It can basically do a lot more heavy lifting. It can get you information a lot quicker and faster, and it can help you build some logic into SAP Business One that would normally take a developer to do. And you can do this all on your own, right? So it lets you customize SAP Business One to suit your business needs. For example, you can start customizing screen layouts. You can hide and move tabs and fields to any place you want in SAP Business One. You can create logic behind certain rules and logic behind, for example, a button that you press calls up another report, or it creates a macro in the background. Okay? There's no coding involved in any of these customizations. So there's no need for a developer. So with B1UP, users can do the following. You can tailor SAP Business One, redesign screens and menus, create new workflows and business rules on the fly. It's going to save you time and help you automate your work. You can reduce errors and make sure the data is entered correctly. You can do all of the above yourself. And like I said before, you don't need a developer. And of course, Project Line is always happy to help if you need it. So this is actually a really cool link, you know, that basically describes, you know, some of the SAP Business One features versus B1UP. Right. So as you all know, in the latest version of 9.1, SAP 9.1, you know, they've gone leaps and bounds and added more functionality into SAP Business One. But B1 Usability Package still has a lot more features in terms of configuration. So, for example, here's a list of some of the things that is available in 9.1, and here are some of the things that it still can't do, whereas B1UP can address. Right. I'm not going to go through this entire list, but as you can see here, there's quite a bit of functionality that B1UP can do that SAP can't do. Okay, quite a bit. So keep that in the back of your mind there. I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint here. So what are we going to show you today? We're going to show you tools with SAP Business One. Like, for example, they've got a very powerful B1 search bar, and I'm going to show you how that compares to the SAP B1 search bar. I'm going to show you what they call a toolbox, and this is 40 and more out-of-the-box features that enhance the general usability of SAP Business One. I'll show you how to create some mandatory fields. We can basically make any field in SAP Business One mandatory. And so what does that mean? It means, you know, users will never forget to accidentally enter data into a screen. I'll show you how easy it is to add and edit some of the menus in SAP Business One. And we're going to do some really cool stuff as well. We're going to create some function buttons, not just putting a button on a screen, but putting some business-specific logic behind that button, okay? And we're going to create some rules. And some of these rules might be some line loops. And a line loop is a really cool feature in B1UP, because basically what it does, you define a rule and it checks row by row on a document, for example, and validates some information. And you might have a trigger, such as maybe when I click the add button on a document, it initiates that line loop to keep looking, searching for every line in SAP in that document to make sure you have correct info, for example. And underneath all of this is, you know, I'm going to show you what universal functions are. And this is basically the logic that's happening behind the scenes in B1UP. Okay. For example, when I click on a button, I might have a universal function behind that button that calls a SQL query or a customer report, or it creates a message prompt on your screen, etc. So we'll go into that as well. So without further ado, prepare to be amazed. I'm just going to jump right into SAP Business One here. Okay. So the first thing you might notice here is we've got this B1UP search bar, but we've also got the SAP Business One search bar. So in SAP Business One, let's say, for example, I look up a customer, Skintastic. Now, when I click on search, all it's going to do is bring up the business partner master data of Skintastic, right? Now, if I type that in here, and click on search, it brings up every single document that I've ever, that Skintastic has belongs to or has been traded on, such as an AR invoice. I've got a sales order. It brings up any business partner activity I've created for Skintastic. It also brings up the business partner record. It brings up some incoming transactions or incoming payments, I should say. And I can usually drill in to any one of these documents as well. So what does that mean to you? If you're a customer service rep and you're on the phone with a customer and they want to look up some information, just simply type in Skintastic in the search bar, and you can easily and quickly bring up all their history, any transaction regarding Skintastic. Okay? Now, furthermore, if you look down into the search bar, B1UP is basically doing a search on every single one of these documents or objects in SAP Business One. But on top of that, you've also got search capabilities outside of the SAP Business One. Maybe I want to search on Google or on Bing, Wikipedia, or Twitter, right? So if I type Skintastic, and I want to do a specific search in one of these documents, or maybe on Google, what it's going to do is, you can see here, it's actually bringing up Google and Skintastic in the search bar and bringing up anything that has to do with Skintastic in Google. So again, you can do searches within SAP or outside of SAP. You can even customize your own search criteria as well. If I wanted to, maybe for example, I have a user-defined table, and I want to search within a user-defined table. Well, I can add that user-defined table into this search list of objects, and I can search within there as well. But on top of that, let's say, for example, I want to search within a row on a purchase order. You know, I might have a really huge purchase order with tons of rows. As you can see over here, I've got this search line bar here. Let's say, for example, I want to search a row with the word red in it. It brings up the first row with red in it, but it doesn't. You don't just have to search the very first word. It could be a second or third word, or any word within that string. For example, let's type in the word butter. Brings me to this line here, butter. As you see, it's the second word within that string. And if I click on search again, it'll take me to the next row with the word butter in it. It's not just description. You can search, you know, the BP catalog number. And in other words, the customer, the vendor's own item code number. Right? I can even search within the item number column itself. Right? So a really useful tool, especially if you've got a lot of rows within a document. Okay? So those are just some of, you know, the out-of-the-box tools that come with B1UP. Speaking of out-of-the-box tools, let's talk about what they have, a feature called the Toolbox configuration, right? So, for example, let's open up maybe a business partner. Actually, you know what? I'm going to stick to my purchase order here. Make it simple. I've already got it open here. So what I'll do is I'll right-click. Just right-click anywhere, and I'm going to open up. These are basically B1UP functions here. Some features and functions here. I'm going to click on Toolbox. And think of the Toolbox as predefined or pre-configured features. And you've got different tabs pertaining to the different objects in SAP Business One where you can have some predefined features. So for example, under the business partner object, I want to, select the email use button, use the email button. Now I'm not going to go through every single one of these features. There's way too many to list in such a short webinar, but I'm just going to highlight some of the few that I like. So I'm going to use the email button. Maybe I want to start my cursor in the name field as opposed to the code field. Maybe I want to throw a flag on my business partner, right? So for example, if I were to drill into any customer, okay, here you go. Here's a customer. I've got an email address here. So if I want to use that email button, you see it, B1UP's created this little button right here. So if I click on that button, it's basically going to open up my Outlook or whatever email tool I use, and it's going to automatically put the contact information of my customer in there, and I can email directly from there, straight away from B1UP. So again, another nice out-of-the-box tool. You can see I've also got a flag up here that shows, the respective currency or the where this customer's head office is. It's basically pulling the default country. Okay, so let's go back to my toolbox configure. Let's look at some of these other out-of-the-box tools here. This is actually under documents. This is a really good one. These two boxes here, where it says go to new sales document or go to new purchase document. You know how when you create a document in SAP Business One, and as soon as you click on add, all the information from your screen disappears and you're in a new document? By selecting these checkboxes, you can stay within that document. So for example, if I'm going to create a new purchase order, and I'm just going to pick an item, right? Usually when I click on add, it's going to bring up a brand new purchase order screen. But if I click on add this time, oh, look at this. I've got a mandatory field. I created a mandatory field here. So I got to put in some information here. So if I click on add, it's going to bring that purchase order that I just created, that I just added, and it's going to keep it on my screen. It's a nice tool to have. So, there's like I said before, there's a lot of out-of-the-box toolbox configurations, too many for me to go through all, but there's a couple of other ones just while we're in here. This is a cool one. Use chart of account print, okay? How many times have you been, for example, in your chart of accounts, and you want to basically print this screen? Well, native SAP Business One won't exactly let you do that, right? You just want to print this window. But by checking that box, right, if I go to print preview now, it basically puts it out here into a PDF, right? Which is really nice for all the accountants out there. They just want to get an export of all your GL accounts, okay? And you've got some other nice little features here. I like this one, the use arrow key navigation. You know how you've got those arrow keys on your keyboard? And for example, if I pull up a sales order, and let's say, for example, I pick a customer and they happen to be over the credit limit. I get this prompt on my screen. Well, I can use my little arrow keys on my keyboard to toggle between yes and no, right? And you can do that with your tab key, but the nice thing about the arrow key is it's close to your enter button. So nice little feature to have. So again, out of the box, some predefined toolbox configurations. Okay. We talked about mandatory fields earlier. I showed you on my purchase order screen, I had a mandatory field. So for example, let me just pick a vendor here. I want to make the vendor reference number mandatory field. How do I do that? It's really easy. If you know how to right-click, you know how to create a mandatory field. So I'm going to right-click this field, make this field mandatory. Okay? So what am I looking at here? This B1UP screen tells me, okay, it puts all this information in for me. Tells me, okay, the form type, which is 142, that's a purchase order. Tells me the description. I can pick and choose, you know, which users I want to make this field mandatory for. Okay, I can select maybe myself or a certain person, or I can even exclude all users or certain users as well. I want to do this when they add or update a purchase order. Maybe I want to set a specific color. I want to make the background red so it stands out a little bit more as a mandatory field. Okay. I also have this option over here. Maybe I want to send a warning. Maybe I just don't want to make it a mandatory. Maybe I just want a message prompt that says, hey, you forgot to put in the vendor reference number. Okay. But in this case, I don't want a warning. I just want to make it a mandatory field. Okay. Again, if I try and add this, I get an error at the bottom saying the following field is mandatory. So now I've got to put in a number in there and click on add. Oh, I forgot to put an item in there. That makes sense. Okay. So now I can add it. And you can see, remember I made it red, so it stands out a little bit more. Okay. So what does that mean? It means people can't make a mistake. They can't add a purchase order without putting this pertinent information into this mandatory field. Okay. Now we can also move fields around. You know, in 9.1 you can do that, but it's not as friendly as with B1UP, and it also takes it a little bit a step further as well. So let's say, for example, I'm in a sales order. I'll just go to my last one here. Let's go to my accounting tab, for example. I've got this field called web order number, right? Again, if you can right-click, you can hide a field. I'm just going to right-click, and I'm going to select hide this item. Okay? So what it does is it brings up the item placement tool. Okay? I can make this hidden for certain users. I can basically make it active or inactive. It tells me what I'm hiding. I'm hiding the label as well as the data field. Okay? So if I click on add, you can see now that web order number field is gone. But what if I want to move a field? Well, I want to move this federal tax ID field, for example, underneath my journal remark field. So again, if you know how to right-click, you can move a field. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to select move this item. Okay? And B1UP is going to ask me, do you wish to place this field above or below another field? And I'm going to say I want to put it below another field. And now it's going to ask me, where exactly do you want to put it? I want to put it underneath the journal remark field. So I'm going to click on journal remark. And again, it's telling me, it's asking me, really, do you want to make this, move this here for all users or certain users? What am I moving here? I'm moving the label, right? The label field as well as the input data field. It's telling me actually my coordinates as well. So for example, if I scroll over here, it's telling me my coordinates. So if I say update, you can see I've got it perfectly below my journal remark field. Okay? So again, if you know how to right-click, you know how to do it. You don't need to be a developer. So this is why this tool is so powerful. It's so simple, and anybody can use it. Okay? Now, what about maybe creating a new tab? You know, I want to create a new tab. Maybe I want to create a new tab within a business partner. So let's drill into my business partner. And let's say, for example, I want to put a new tab somewhere in here. So I'll right-click in here, and I'll say Create New Tab. I'm going to call it Miscellaneous. And I want to add some user-defined fields that I've created earlier on the Business Partner Master Table. So I'm going to add these fields here. And I'm going to click OK. So if I close this and then come back into my Business Partner Master Data, I'll see I've got a new tab here. It's called Miscellaneous. If I click in there, I've got some fields nicely aligned. So maybe I want to capture the number of employees, 20 for this customer. They've got 15 licenses. Is their maintenance active? Yes, it is. So again, just like that, it literally took me seconds to create a brand new tab, put some fields in there, and again, that saves you, a lot of time, a lot of money. Normally that would take, if traditional SDK work would take a little bit longer. Not that we're not happy to do it for you, but again, this tool is a really user-friendly tool. Okay. What I can do right now, I'm also going to show you how to easily create maybe a new module within our main menu. Okay. So you can see right here, I've got all my standard SAP Business One modules. But I want to create maybe a new module called Quality Control. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click, click on Add and Edit Menu. Okay. I'm going to call it So Quality Control is going to be my main module. I'm going to have, a sub-module in there. And it's going to basically maybe be a report. Actually, I'll call it QC Report 1. Okay, so let's kind of recap what I'm doing here. I'm creating another menu item called Quality Control. Within that menu or that module, I'm creating a sub-module called QC Report. Okay? Right here, it's asking, where do you want to put it? Well, I'm telling you, I want to put it on the main menu. If I double-click in that field, I can tell it if I want to. I can tell B1UP if I want to put it into a specific module that already exists, or if I just want to put it on the main menu window, which I'm going to do right here. So I'm going to choose Modules. Okay, and here I'm telling the system that I want to create this sub-module underneath my parent, which is this menu ID right here. Position number 10, all I'm saying here is I want it to show up as the 10th module in my list on my main menu. I can even point to a specific image. Let's say I have an icon called QC, and I want that to show up on my main menu. I'm going to do that too. And this is going to basically call, so my sub-module, I want to call a universal function. Remember what I said earlier about universal functions? It's basically the logic that's happening behind the scenes. So in this case, I'm telling it to call this specific SQL report. Again, I could have a message, SQL report, I can launch a macro, I can launch a CRIS report, but I want to call a SQL report, and here's the SQL query that I wrote a little bit earlier today. Okay? And pay attention also to the formatting here. So formatting, I'm basically saying in column 1, I wanted to have a drill down arrow into the production table. I want to have a drill down into the item master table. You can also do this through a wizard as well. Okay, I'll get back into that a little bit later. Okay, so if I click OK, activate those, and say update, check this out. I've got a brand new module called Quality Control. Okay, remember my sub-module? I created something called QC Report 1. I click on that, and it calls that crystal report that I wrote earlier today. I've created some drill down arrows. Okay, so basically this quality control is giving me some data on some fields, giving my viscosity range, my internal total plate count, my color standard, my pH range. some quality control fields that I have within my production order, for example. And if I want from here, I can drill right into that production order. And these are the fields that I have here in my production order. Okay, these are the user-defined fields that's being called into my report. So just like that, in a matter of really seconds, I've created a brand new module that, and I can create several other sub-modules if I want. And basically, just like that, I'm calling across the report. But let's kind of rewind a bit. Let's go back to that universal function. Okay, I'm going to bring it back up. I'm going to call that universal function. Okay, so again, if I want, I can put a refresh button. So for example, if a new production order was added, and when I run that query, it'll automatically refresh the data within that report. But going back to this formatting here, right, if I pull up this wizard, okay, let's take a look at what we have here. Okay, the columns in my report, I'm telling the system, put a golden arrow on column 1, put a golden arrow on column 2. And I'm telling it to drill into a production order table. And in my second column on my query, put a golden arrow on the item code, and that drills directly into the item master, for example. And if you notice on some of my fields in my SQL report, they were numeric fields or data fields. So I want to make them right justified, right, because they're numeric fields. So some of the stuff you can do, I can even do a sum. Maybe I want to sum these two columns here. So what I'll do is I'll update that. Let's go back and run our quality control report 1. You can see I've summed these last two columns. Okay. Again, because they're numeric fields, I want them right justified, and I can drill, for example, into the item code. Okay. Or in this case, it's bill of material. So pretty powerful stuff here. What I also want to do is actually talk about creating some more function buttons that actually have even more logic. Let's have some more fun with this. So let's take, for example, a quotation. And for example, here's a scenario. When I create a quotation, if I'm a sales guy and I create a quotation, I want a button on my screen that tells me what are all the previously invoiced items to this customer, right? So let's go ahead and start doing that. Let's right-click. Let's add a function button to this window. Okay. I probably have one already predefined. Okay, yeah, I do. So here's my function button. I just need to activate it. Okay. So again, I'm putting a function button on my sales quotation screen. Okay. And what I'm going to do is that function button is going to have some logic behind it. That logic is this universal function. So if I drill into that, again, I'm calling a query that I wrote earlier today. I basically want to know what are all the items that were invoiced to this customer. Actually, I noticed in my query here, it's calling the sales order table. It's actually showing me what items I have placed on sales orders to customers, but I want to actually know what's invoiced. I want to know what they paid for. So I'm going to change my table to OINV. And change this table to INV1. Change my format. I'm going to open my wizard here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to the invoice table. Right? In other words, I want to be able to drill, put a golden arrow and drill into the invoice table. Okay? What's really important to note here, what's really, really cool is when I run that report, I can draw that data into the rows of my quotation. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. But let's update this. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of my quotation and come back in. And now you can see I've got this button up here, items invoiced. So let's pick a customer, Skintastic. I want to know what items I've invoiced them. So I click on this button, and it shows me a list of every single item that was previously invoiced. I can alter the quantity, for example, and maybe I want to, because I want to draw this into my row on my quotation. So I see that they previously purchased 12,500 of this item. Maybe this time I just want to sell them 10,000. And instead of 480, they're such a great customer, I'm going to make it 475. Right? Again, I can select all. I can pick and choose which ones I can select by clicking Control on my keyboard and selecting specific rows, for example. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to select these items from my list and put them into my quotation rows. So I say select. Just like that, I draw that information into Business One or into the rows of my quotation. But it's important to remember, let me go back. Let me right click here, go back to my function button logic. And let's go back to the universal function because I want to go back to this select data target. Again, select data target, what it's doing is when I run that report, all the items that were invoiced, I'm telling Business One or B1UP to select this field, 38.1.0, which is basically the item code, right? I'm telling it to select this field in my report, 38, my quantity, and put it into the quantity field. And I'm telling it to select the price and put it into the price field in my quotation. You're probably wondering, well, how do I even know what those numbers are, right? So how do you figure that information out? Very simply, you go into View, turn on your system information, and you hover your mouse over that respective field. So over the item number, I can see the item is 38. If you look at the bottom down here, the item number is 38. The column is 1, okay? And in my quantity field, the item is 38, the column is 11, right? And in my unit price field, the item again is 38, the column is 14. Okay, so that's how I know what to put in here. Okay, this is how I tell the system to pull that information from my report into those fields or those columns on my quotation screen. Okay, really cool stuff. Let's take it a step further. Okay, I'm just going to close this out here. I don't need this. So let's take it, a step further. I want to do something called a line loop. So what's a line loop? A line loop, again, what it does is it validates information line by line on a document. And you define the rules, for example. So for example, I want to do a line loop on a sales order that's going to add an item code based on a condition, such as a BP property, if it's checked or not. And what it does, it's going to add, when I click on add on the sales order, it's going to initiate that line loop and it's going to add another item. So maybe a better way of saying this is it's just going to check rules that I establish and it's going to basically add a brand new item on a sales order. So for example, here's the scenario. I'm a salesperson, I'm entering an order, and I forget to put a specific item on my sales order screen. I want the system to check every line to see whether or not I've missed a specific item based on certain criteria. So, for example, let me pick a business partner. Let me pick my customer here. My rule is this. This is my rule. This is my condition. If this business property is checked, property number 1, provide free 2015 fall catalog, if that is checked against this business partner, I want the line loop to check that condition. The other thing I wanted to do is check every item code on each row to see if, that catalog is missing. And if the user forgot to enter that catalog, the system will automatically enter that catalog on the row for me. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's put in a delivery date. Let's select some items. Okay, so I've got some items on here, but none of these items happen to be a free catalog item, right? I forgot to enter it in. So what I'm going to do is if I click on Add Now, the system does a line loop. I get a prompt here. It says, this customer is eligible for a free 2015 fall catalog. This item will be added to the order automatically. And as you can see here, it's automatically created a line with that item on there. So think of it as a second pair of eyes, like a teacher breathing down your back. Did you cross all your T's, dot all your I's, right? I forgot to enter this free catalog number item on the sales order, so the system enters it for me, right? So what I can do now, I can add it. They also get a prompt. They exceeded the credit limit. That's okay. And there you go. So how did I do that, right? Let's go back here. Let's right-click. And let's look at the B1. Let's edit the B1 validation configurations. Let's take a look at what's happening behind the scenes here. Okay. Basically, that line loop gets triggered. It's first of all, it's taking a look at whether or not when I'm in add or update mode, right? It's going to basically, that's my trigger. Okay. When I click on add or update on a sales order, it's going to trigger this line loop. And it's going to do it on this equal condition, okay? It's going to check whether or not my property number 1 on my business partner is checked or not, okay? And what it does is it's going to call this universal function that I created here, okay? This universal function is a line loop, and it's checking every line for this particular item code. If that item code doesn't exist, it's going to add it for me. On top of that, it's going to bring up it's going to basically call another universal function where I'm saying just put it on the last row on the sales order. And it's going to also bring up a prompt. It's going to bring up a message prompt that says, if that item is missing, it's going to say this customer is eligible for a free 2015 catalog. This item will be added to the order automatically. It's my message box. So that's what's going on behind the scenes here. So, another example is like for my company, a project line, when I create quotes, for example, I have customers that, when I sell them licenses, for example, I sometimes forget that I also need to sell them a SQL license too. So I'll put down, for example, a professional license on my quote, but a nice feature about this is if I click on add, it'll check to see whether or not this customer is eligible for a SQL license, and it'll put that SQL license automatically onto my quotation. So again, simple validations that you can create in rules within SAP Business One without having to be a developer. Okay. I know we're running tight on time right now, so I'm just going to show one more feature, one last feature. Again, today's not going to be a training exercise or training webinar. I promise to come back and do more webinars in the future that are maybe a little bit more feature-focused, a little bit more training-oriented. I just wanted to give you a flavor of what some of the things B1UP can do. But one last thing, let's take a look at business partners, okay? You can see I've got some buttons on my screen up here. If I click on this button here, it brings up a quotation stream. It's a nice shortcut button. Why is that cool? Because I can start my process right from here. I can do everything from here. If I want to create an order, bring up the customer, create an order from there. Okay. If I want to bring up an aging report, I can bring up an aging report directly from there. How did I do that? Easily. I right-click. I create or a new function button or edit existing function button in this case. And what you can see here is I've got a list of predefined buttons I can create. Maybe I want to create a button called Sales Opportunity that brings up the Sales Opportunity window. Right. So if I get out of there, come back into my Business Partner Master, I've got a Sales Opportunity. I click on there, and boom. I can do sales opportunities directly from there. Let's go back and let's create some more buttons on there. So I'm going to edit. I'm going to edit function buttons on this window. and I want to create a new button. So I'm going to say Add. And let's say, here's a scenario. I want to create a button for my salespeople that, brings up Google Map directions, so they can easily find out how to get to their clients using Google directions. So Google directions. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to launch an external launcher. All this is saying is launch an external program like Internet Explorer, for example. So I launch that. Okay. I click on Update. I'm actually going to link a universal function to this too. So I already got one called Google Directions. And what this is doing is I'm telling it to launch Internet Explorer. And I'm putting an argument in here. I'm saying when the Google Directions website comes up, put in certain information, right? Certain input information. I'm saying select the customer's street, their city, their state, their country, right? I'm also saying select my company information as the front point in my Google Directions, and I'm also saying use the customer's address here as the to point in Google Directions, okay? So I'll click on that. I'm going to update. I'm going to get out of my business partner. I'm going to bring it back up on my screen. You can see I've got a new button called Google Directions, okay? It's going to look at, for example, my bill to address here for my customer. If I click on that, it's going to bring up Google Maps, and it's going to put in their address as the to point, as the to point, and my address as the from point. Okay, so I've just made my salespeople's lives a little bit easier. Okay, save them some time. Okay, so easy stuff you can do here. I know we're out of time today, but I hope I've given everybody a little taste of some of the functionality that B1UP can do. Like I said before, it's like putting SAP Business One on steroids, right? You can basically get the information a lot faster. You can build custom logic into the system, and you define that logic. Again, you don't have to be a developer. Okay. I'd like to take this time to thank everybody and maybe open up the floor to any questions. Jillian, if you can maybe unmute everybody, if you have that. Power.
We do. Sometimes we get a lot of feedback when we do that, so I would encourage you to type your questions into the chat window, and then I can read them out and have Jerwin provide an answer for everyone to hear. Just give it a minute for people to send their questions in if they have any. I'll also say if you do have any questions following the session that you kind of think of a little bit later on today or tomorrow, you can always email them to either myself or Jerwin. His email is up on the screen there, as well as Gerald. I've also included them in a message in the chat window, so you can feel free to email us with any questions that you have. I don't see anything coming in here.
Oh, that means I've done a good job.
Absolutely. It was a great session. We covered a lot of ground, but there's some great features there. So thank you to Jerwin for that. As I mentioned, the recording will be loaded up to our YouTube channel and our website later today, and you'll get a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to that. So feel free to check out the recording if there's anything you wanted to review or share it with anyone in your office that wasn't able to attend. And Peter from Project Line wants to know if there's a coincidence that both your names start with GER.
It's funny, we get confused. A lot of people confuse us a lot of times. I'm the younger, better looking one. Joe's the older one.
We do have one question here. What level of permissions do you need to perform these functions?
Okay, great question. So again, you can define who has access to some of these B1UP configuration tools. You can define all that logic within B1UP. So within B1UP, there's actually a little menu or submenu that allows you to check or uncheck who has authorization to certain features within B1UP.
Okay. Perfect. And just one quick second. Sounds like Gerald has something he'd like to add.
Yeah. Yes. I'd just like to add to that. With any license, B1UP license, any user can do these configurations, but you could prevent other users from doing it too. So that's how you would do that.
Right. Okay. Any other questions there?
We don't have anything else right now. So thank you to everyone for attending, and thank you to Jerwin for a great session. And we'll see you all.
Sorry, I was just going to say, like I said before, we promised to come back and do more B1UP webinars, maybe some feature focus on maybe some line loops, a little bit more deeper diving into that. But yeah, watch out for the upcoming webinars.
Absolutely. And yeah, I just had one more question. Will the recording be available? Yes, it will be up on our website later today, so you'll all receive a link to that tomorrow. And one more question. Will B1UP custom configuration survive SAP Business One version upgrades?
Sorry, could you, let me see if I can read that. I'm having a hard time getting in there. Will B1UP custom configuration survive SAP Business One version upgrades? You know, every time there's usually an SAP version upgrade, B1UP or B1 also releases a compatible version that is compatible with that major Business One upgrade. Okay, so just very recently, SAP released 9.1, and obviously B1 had to release a version that is compatible with 9.1 as well. So the answer is yes.
It's also compatible for HANA.
Sorry, Gerald, you cut out there?
Yeah, no, I was just saying you should mention that it's also compatible for HANA. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for HANA as well, absolutely.